Maybe wait another minute and see.
Well, I will officially convene this meeting and hope that you've all had a chance to go over the agenda. We're going to be talking about the vision and goals tonight, and we've got a couple of minor modifications to it, but we're going to need to approve that tonight. And then we're going to move into a slide presentation and get another update on possibilities with what we can do with that trail. And Julie's going to, of course, take care of that. So I don't think I need to go through introductions. As I look at my screen, it looks like everybody is officially has been here before. So I think we're good with that. Is everybody okay with that? All right, thank you. And so Julie, I think you're going to give us the project background and some schedule information on that, and then we'll move into the vision and goals. I'm going to need to get that approved tonight, and I think that's our only official business. Julie, am I correct on that?
Yes, that is the only official business, but we do have quite an agenda. So let me figure out how to share my screen. There we go.
And so just to let everybody know as well, before we go into that, I already had this conversation earlier, but I am in Mexico and I have 45 minutes and then I will be departing for dinner. We are an hour ahead of you. So Mayor Delane is going to take over from me at about 5:45 your time.
Okay. I think we went through the meeting purpose and outcomes. Just a brief overview again, most of you have seen this. It's the Council Creek Regional Trails, what we're talking about. It's part of a network of planned trails that will lead from the Portland metro area to the coast. And it will serve both recreational and transportation purposes. We are working with the east-west portion of the trail leading from downtown Hillsborough, the Hatfield Government Station Max Station, through Cornelius to almost to Pacific University in downtown Forest Grove. And it runs about a quarter mile north of TV Highway on the abandoned railroad line. Reminder about the project timeline and funding. We're midway through the preliminary design project. We have a $1.5 million grant from Metro Regional Flexible Fund Allocation Grant. Hoping to wrap that up in 1 year, which is why we're having all these meetings so fast and furious. And then we'll be moving quickly into our $17.5 million RAISE grant that we received from the U.S. Department of Transportation, which will fund our final design, engineering, and construction. And then we recently were notified that we received another $6.3 million regional flexible fund allocation grant that has been confirmed. I think last time we met, we were not 100% sure. So looking forward to that. And that is for enhanced crossings, pedestrian and bike crossings at arterials and collectors, and also a state highway. And looking forward to opening the project in 2029. Just a reminder of, we kind of have 4 major phases of the project. Kind of started out building the foundation, and now we're getting into defining the alternatives, hoping to select a preferred alternative early next year in February, ideally, and then moving into design and engineering to get to the 30% stage by the end of next year. And just want to keep you up to speed on what else has been happening or is going to be happening on the project in terms of community and agency engagement. We'll be meeting with our stakeholder advisory committee, having our second meeting on December 6th in a couple of weeks. And we're also planning an online open house and survey, and hoping that will run basically the month of January. I don't have exact dates, but it's basically going to be the month of January. And possibly planning, and we're working on a in-person event during the open house to encourage people to participate in the online survey. That is likely to be at the Cornelius Library, but we're not 100% sure about that yet. Also, we met with the Technical Advisory Committee on Friday last week, reviewing similar material to what you'll be seeing today. So I may chime in with some comments for things that we heard from them as we go along the way. I wanted to included this slide for the committee charter. We had talked about this last time because there were some people that were up for election. And so we wanted to know if there were going to be any new members. And also, it's also becoming clear with scheduling conflicts that it really would be a good idea for everyone to designate an alternate. So we'd like to know who those are too. If you know them today, that would be great. If not, just let me know and we'll include them in the scheduling and that kind of thing.
So Julie, if we could stop right there just for a second. I think, Kyle, you're the only one that is termed out in next month. Am I correct with that? And we are going to be looking to you to provide who is going to be your replacement. Am I correct in that?
Yes, I almost called you mayor. Yes, you're correct. So we have a transportation meeting tomorrow, and we have an item on the agenda to discuss this. So hopefully after that meeting, I'll be able to maybe email you, Julie, a name of my replacement and also an alternate for this committee.
That would be great. Thank you.
I don't think we have anyone else that is in that position. Tim, you're still good with us for a couple more years. Is that correct?
I'm on council for a couple more years, but there's no guarantee that I'm going to still be able to be on this committee.
Is that council decision to do that?
Yes.
Okay. So we'd like to think that you'll stick with us for the next couple of years, and then we'll shift to a plan B.
That'll be up to council.
When
Okay.
do you know when they'll make that decision?
Probably not until January.
Okay.
And your new mayor is installed as of when?
The 12th of December.
Okay. Okay. Anyone else? We don't have any issues with that. And then, of course, alternates will be good as well. So yeah, let's just make sure we get back to Julie on those recommendations.
Great. Thank you. We don't have a slide for it, but I think the next thing we should talk about is the vision and goals update. And you have it in your packet. We don't have a slide. We just had some minor changes and I can summarize them pretty quickly. In the vision statement, we added the east-west portion to clarify that we are talking about the east-west portion of the trail, not the north-south. Made a couple of other edits, changed the to an active mobility backbone, sorry. And then added the language considers emerging technologies and potential transit use toward the end of the vision statement. In your packet, there was a track changes version. So I'm just highlighting them in case you weren't able to review it. For the increased mobility and access goal, we had to use the word increases non-motorized access. We didn't want to use the term non-motorized because we anticipate there could be e-bikes or scooters or micro mobility devices with motors. So we changed that term to active mobility access. And then the last two, I'm not going to go into detail, but we did split out. We had one goal that was protect and enhance environmental and cultural resources. We split that into two at your request to protect cultural resources and protect and enhance environmental resources and habitats. The language is mostly the same. just split that into two separate goals, thinking that those were two distinct important goals that we wanted to achieve. So
has everyone had a chance to review those? Do you have any comments, any issues with those changes that have been proposed?
Hey, Jerry, Juan Carlos here. First of all, I want to make sure that is my Zoom acting up, or are we still stuck on the committee charter slide? Or
there
am I
was,
not
yeah,
seeing-
yeah, there was no slide for the goals. It was in your packet, and
Yeah. Okay, great.
yeah,
Yeah.
sorry about that.
I know it's okay. It's okay. I
Yeah.
just wanted to make sure there wasn't a more kind of like fundamental issue with my tech going on. But just to answer the question, I saw the packet, and I thought it reflected the spirit of the conversation, and also appreciated the spelling out of the goals and things like that. So good work. Thank you.
Mhm.
Move to
So
accept.
any other? Okay, I have a motion to accept
Second, Alan.
and a second. So everyone in favor, wave or say hi.
Aye.
Aye.
And I'm assuming we don't have any opposition, but if you do, speak up. And if not, we will approve the vision and goals. So thank you for that. One small step, I guess, moving ahead. So we're good there, Julie?
Yeah, I think we're good there. So I will move on with the presentation. This is kind of a leftover slide, and just a reminder, maybe it could have gone with the background and context. What is a regional trail? Just a reminder that we're talking about generally a 12 to 16-foot paved trail. And it may contain elements such as you see here, like a bridge or a boardwalk, and enhanced pedestrian crossings where we meet arterials and collectors and high volume traffic streets. And then we'll get into a little bit of the meat of the discussion here. We want to talk about, this is kind of an overview of the decision-making framework, and we've already gone through the vision, why we're doing this project, and the goals. That's what we just approved. And now we're moving into the kind of the next stage, which is the objectives. How can we meet the goals? And then the next phase you'll see later on will be design criteria and performance metrics. We won't be getting into that today, but we are going to present some draft objectives for your review and comment for each of the goals. So I'll read through these, and then maybe we can just stop at the end of each goal and see if anybody has any comments or questions. So for goal 1, ensure equitable trail access. The objectives are to increase access for low income and communities of color, connects the trail with employment centers, education centers, public and health services. Design a trail that is welcoming and comfortable to people of all ages and abilities and new trail users. The presence of all ages, abilities, genders, races, ethnicities, and income levels are generally indicators of a healthy, successful environment. Provide seamless accommodation of universal access. Any comments, questions, proposed changes? I'll move on, and then we can talk about it at the end too if there are more comments. Goal 2, create a safe and enjoyable user experience with the objectives to provide safe crossings of streets by reducing conflicts with vehicles, design the trail to accommodate emergency vehicle access, provide for eyes on the trail and visibility, including clear sight lines, provide enough space for people to move through the corridor at different speeds. People cycling are not in conflict with families walking. Identify opportunities to create gathering spaces and shade. Create a trail that is efficient to maintain over time. Questions? Yes, Councilor Rippey.
We don't have anything mentioning here about lighting of any kind. I think in terms of safety, there needs to probably be some criteria around lighting in particular spots.
That's a good question, and I might defer to Adrian on that. Is that something that would be more included in the design objectives when we get to that, or is that something that we should be including here?
That would be in the design objectives. I think creating a safe, we could mention it in the, it is part of the goal to create some safe environments, but I typically that is more on the design side.
Yeah, I think going back to the slide, this is more about the what are we trying to achieve, and then the lighting would be the way that we would achieve it, I think.
Yeah.
Although it does say, how can we meet the goal? We will note it. I'm not sure who is next. JC, maybe?
I just wanted to make note of designing a trail to accommodate emergency vehicle access. Just a quick note that some of those older trestles may need to be rehabbed, and that could cost the project a lot of money. And just, we know that from experience because we're trying to keep the Willamette shoreline open as an active railway. And we've had to rebuild a lot of those trestles, and they're not cheap. So just a note, because you'll have to have those trestles reinforced to accommodate, fire trucks and stuff like that. So I put that out there as a note.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that too. And I think maybe it needs to be the way we word it, because what we've talked about with that is that the trestle would not necessarily support emergency vehicles, but that there would be access on either side along the trail. So I don't know if Adrian has a comment on that, or if that's just something we can note. And
Yeah, and so as part of the project, we understand that we would be not only are the trestles, old and may not accommodate emergency vehicles, they'll have to be upgraded if we decide that the best alignment is to maintain access on those trestles. That is part of the project, and we understand there'll be a high cost for improving those. At any rate, they would be able to access maintenance vehicles. There is access from both sides of the trestle to provide access to emergency vehicles. So we don't anticipate an emergency vehicle having to cross over the trestle unless there's obviously somebody that's injured on the trestle itself.
So how many trestles are we talking about?
We have one trestle that's approximately 400 feet long.
Okay.
Mayor Delane?
You guys hit the safety one, so I was going to ask about the restrooms. Where did the restrooms fall into this? We've got a 6-mile length, and I know that's something that we ended up adding in after the fact on the Banks of Vernonia.
That's a good question. I think that's a design element, and I'm not sure that that's part of the scope of this project that we're doing. We're basically scoping a preliminary design for a basic trail. We don't have funding for things like that yet.
I think we'll be identifying. I think a part of this goal is just to create gathering spaces and shade, and that would include those gathering spaces as they are developed would include restrooms and other amenities. That would be, I think for this project, we'd just be identifying where those locations should be, those places should be located. And then from there, we would go further into what amenities would be needed at those places.
Yeah, that was kind of I think that was one of the things that was a miss on the Banks of Vernonia, is like, oh yeah, restrooms, we're going to need those at places. And then they had to come back and do it. And then it's, I think it's better for us to understand, like you're saying, is where would they be? Where could we do something? There's a park along the way, right? I know in Cornelius, it's like, oh, well, then could Cornelius add a restroom at that park? And that would be a partnership between the trail and the park, right? But yeah, I was thinking to Tim's point, maybe it's not lighting the entire trail, but maybe we're talking about lighting the intersections, especially when you talk about something like crossing Highway 47, that's safe, right? So I think restrooms, emergency vehicle access, and the lighting where it's tactical, I think those are all issues we got to think about.
Yep. Any other comments on this goal?
I think it's easy for us to kind of navigate back and forth to what we're trying to accomplish tonight, kind of a big scope perspective of what we want this to look like. And then later on, when we start talking about design, we can do that. We certainly don't want to leave anything out like restrooms and like lighting. But yeah, I think that will come more into play with the design of the trail itself. So I'm hoping I'm correct there. I'm trying to stay high level at this point.
You are correct. And I think we'll get a little bit more information actually later in the presentation about where that comes in. Any other comments on this? Goal 3, increase mobility and access. So objectives: provide access to employment centers and other key destinations, provides ADA compliant facilities and amenities, create direct access to existing planned local active transportation networks, maintain commercial circulation, essential operations during construction. Any questions or comments? Moving on to goals 4 and 5. We put them both on this slide. Goal 4, protect cultural resources, include recognition of cultural resources, preserve and protect cultural resources. Goal 5, protect and enhance environmental resources, minimize environmental impacts, preserve, protect, or enhance wetlands, wildlife corridors, and natural areas, preserve and protect existing trees, and improve access to natural areas.
I don't know if this needs to be in there, but it says preserve and protect existing trees. I imagine that there's going to be a lot of beautification along that corridor, including planting trees, right? Should that be in there?
I would expect that. Well, I think in terms of the yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we will definitely have landscaping will be something that will come along. I think in terms of what we're looking for here, it's how we're designing the trail within the corridor.
Kyle, I look at it this way, right? If you were there at the beginning of Stubb Stewart, it seemed really silly that we cut all the trees down to plant trees at Stubb Stewart. Now the trees look great now they've matured, but there were already trees there. So why did we cut down the trees that were already there? I mean, if you look, so far I've surveyed the western portion, which is 47 West, and it's almost completely, in some sections, tree covered on both sides, right? It's a tree tunnel. So it would seem silly to go in and disturb that if we don't have to.
And I think that will, if I'm correct about this, Julie, I think that will be again a part of the design features that we're doing when we actually can physically see the trail, walk the line, see what all of that looks like, and where we would locate the trail will have a lot to do with the preservation of trees.
Right. Definitely.
Julie, where do we get into? Maybe it's further down the road, because when I was down on the west end, you know, it goes two different places. There's a north and a south split.
I don't, is there a spur down there or something?
It's pretty equidistant sized, and one of it over there by Douglas Street, it's I wasn't sure which was the one we'd consider, the southern spur or the northern spur. I'm not sure which is the spur and which is the main line, because they both just kind of dead end.
I think Adrian's going to be showing some slides or some graphics later that might make it more clear. I don't recall that. I thought it was pretty clear where it went, but
That's that boots on the ground experience,
Yeah.
right? When you're out there and you go, is it this one or is it that one?
yeah.
Well, that's kind of funny.
There's like a big thing at the end, like a stop kind of that it kind of curves to the south at the west end there in Forest Grove.
I think you may be referring at Hawthorne Street. There's like a split, like a Y, that splits off. One goes on the southern direction towards Douglas Street, and you'll see when you go through the corridor a little bit later, where that lies. But yeah, there is a split there at Hawthorne Street where you can see one of the spurs going up to the north, and then the one which is where the alignment is for this project that kind of goes to the south.
So it is
Yeah,
the
and
alignment to the south, yeah.
And that northern spur is kind of like, well, it's kind of dead without the rest of the trail. So I wonder how we consider some of those, right? And there's a lot of spurs along the way also we'll have to talk about.
Well,
Councilor Rippey? Yeah.
First of all, what did the master plan indicate? I think the original master plan indicated the southern part that terminates about a block away from Pacific University, whereas the northern one is almost all along the industrial area. Wouldn't necessarily be that attractive to a trail in the first place. I would go back to what the master plan looked like, and then I would also, in my own opinion, the southern spur would be the one that would be more favorable to bringing people into the downtown Forest Grove area.
Yeah, that's the one that we've been looking at.
Yep. And I kind of look at it as like an opportunity, right? If you kill the whole trail because of the spurs now defunct, man, then maybe that would make some great trail parking.
Right, that's something we could consider. JC?
Julie, could you go back to the safety one? If you wouldn't mind, just go back.
Sure.
And I'm not trying to,
This one?
yeah. I think the other piece that I wanted to add to this one was to develop partnerships to ensure the safety of the trail. And I say that only because so the Springwater corridor in Portland, has a lot of crime / home, houselessness issues. So I think it's also making sure that we develop partnerships with community groups, law enforcement, services, community services that we can rely on to help. Obviously they share in the burden, but just another note as we want to develop this trail and to be the best it possibly can be. So just my couple of notes.
I think that is an excellent idea. I think that might fit more into when we get into the implementation and management of the trail. I think here we're talking about more design objectives, but excellent point.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, and it has an existing homeless problem on in the area I've surveyed already, right? So
Any more questions on these, or should we move on? So I want to talk a little bit about where we are in the project, because I think we're all kind of actually having similar ideas and thoughts about kind of jumping ahead on where we are in the trail design process. And this was a little bit confusing to me, and the consultants kind of helped me organize it in my head. And I hope these slides help you organize it as well. Right now, we're making trail alignment decisions, and that's the decision that we're hoping to make early next year in February, winter 2022-23. We're talking about it now and hoping to be able to make a decision early next year. This is kind of a high-level evaluation and risk assessment, and what we're trying to identify is the alignment that's feasible, that we can construct and best meets the project goals that we've been talking about through this process. And then once we've identified that alignment, we will develop it in further detail, and that we'll talk about in the next slide. But we've kind of outlined this process, and I think we kind of introduced it to you last time, where we're looking at we we've broken the trail alignment into 6 segments, and you'll see that in Adrian's presentation. And within each of those 6 segments, we want to decide whether the trail should go in the north, center, or south, be placed in the north, center, or south of the right-of-way, and what makes the best sense for each segment, and then also for a trail as a whole through the corridor, what makes the most sense. And we've identified some alignment criteria that you'll see in a couple of slides, but our first priority is for trail implementation. What makes the most sense for the trail? What makes the trail the best? And then we've also got this tier 2 alignment criteria that we've talked about, that in looking for opportunities to optimize trail and transit combination. If there is high capacity transit somewhere down the line, where do we have opportunities to facilitate that? If we do. So these are the decisions that we're making immediately and we need to make pretty soon. We also have these trail design decisions that we'll be talking about more later next year in the spring and summer of 2023. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but these are some of the things that we're talking about, like where would the trailhead go? What does the cross section look like? Where does the trail access streets or pedestrian ways along the trail? What are potential user amenities and those kinds of things? So, you know, we'll be making those decisions a little bit later. Also, the trail width, how we're avoiding sensitive lands, you know, and looking at in more detail at the pedestrian crossing treatments and that kind of thing. And then we'll be applying prioritization criteria that we'll be working on, so we can determine where to allocate our construction budget. We only have so many dollars. What is the best trail we can build for those dollars? So that's just kind of a preview of where we're going, but kind of bringing us back to where we are now. We're looking at the alignment, the trail alignment, and that is where do we want to put the trail within the corridor? And again, our tier 1 is prioritizing trail implementation, and some of the criteria that we've come up with by segment are cost, feasibility, and that could be based on a number of factors, trail user safety and comfort, environmental impacts, schedule implications, right-of-way impacts, and utility impacts. So these are the first things that we're going to consider with the goal of getting to construction in 2026. And then the next tier would be to optimize trail and transit feasibility, avoiding criteria that we could use would be avoiding overlap between where the trail and transit would go, or minimizing future trail relocation if we decide that's what we want to do. Does anybody have any questions on these past couple of slides? And I'll tell you what we're going to do next. Adrian has a presentation and he's going to go through at a pretty high clip the corridor and identify the conflicts, many of the conflicts that we've seen and challenges that we might have if we push the trail to the north or the south, and also what it looks like if we put the trail in the middle. And feel free to ask him any questions, or if you have any more questions on these before we move into that, that'd be great.
Thanks, Julie. And just a quick question, if I could, Jerry.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Okay, great. We'll have a more substantive conversation after the presentation, I guess is the question. Or
yes,
when is the time for us to have this chat? Probably after the presentation.
Yeah, we're hoping to get through this pretty quickly and leave time for you to talk, because we definitely want to make sure that you have the opportunity to share your thoughts. But
all right, great. No, thank you. I'm really excited.
Okay. Adrian, you want to, let's see.
Yes, Julie, if you could stop sharing your screen, I can share mine.
Okay.
All right. All right, let me see if I can. All right, so I think my screen should be visible. You should see similar plans to what we went over last time. So as Julie mentioned, at our last meeting, if you all recall that we went through and looked at the corridor and identified some of the constraints. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. I'm going to point out specific areas where we may want to focus. But what we've done, and I'm going to zoom in here into our legend to kind of give you a sense of what you're going to see on these plans. And there was a link to these plans on the agenda, so you can go on your own time, take a closer look. But what you'll be seeing is you'll see three alternatives: north, and this like purple color, center alignment, which is the green, and then the south alignment, which is this magenta pink color. Along the corridor, you'll see these diamonds in P, which is a power pole conflict or utility conflict. Trees, which you'll note there are a lot of trees out there. Tree conflicts. There are existing culverts under the railroad. Depending on north or south, we would have to extend those culverts. Grading conflicts, and this will happen primarily over near the trestle area. As part of the railroad, there was a grade increase to get up and over the Dairy Creek. So there's some grade differential between the track and the north and south. So there'll be some grading that'll need to happen there, particularly if we're looking at realigning as we cross over Dairy Creek. Encroachment areas, we identified those at our last meeting as well. We'll dive a little closer to look at some of those impacts based on the alignment. This yellow that is a little bit hard to see, building setbacks. If you recall, there were some buildings that were right up on the property line. So those are things that we'll have to provide some sort of setback away from the face of those buildings. And then there's also some wetlands and bodies of water that will impact depending on alignment. So
Adrian, I see JC has a question.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Adrian. Just a quick question. So the power pole out conflict. So do we know the easement agreements on this? Because is it really a conflict, or because, so I know a lot of easements with power poles that are in the public right of way or in a right of way, they have to move them at their cost, not the projects. Is that the case with this alignment? Do we know?
We have not confirmed. Our assumption is that they are there by permit and they would have to relocate.
Okay.
I anticipate typically they are there. However, we would have to provide or at least give an option for them to move them to a different location within the corridor, which could be an impact to potential transit in the future. So
okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Things. Yeah. Thanks, Julie. If you see any other hands, let me know, because I'm kind of focused on the drawing. So
Sure.
I'll step back here and kind of show, we did break this up, as Julie mentioned, into 6 segments, and really our division of segments was roughly about a mile each, but there were some clear division lines and there were some clear issues that were a part of each segment. So, where one segment was particularly focused on tree and power pole impacts, another segment was focused on such items such as the trestle, and others may have property encroachments. So we kind of broke them out at good division points, as well as trying to focus on specific issues that may be impacting the project. So segment 1, yes.
At this Zoom, it's just a smear on the screen. I'm not sure, maybe you got a 85-inch big screen you're playing it on for yourself, but
yeah, no,
the rest of us human beings, that's pretty much just a smear. Is there any chance we could get a little better zoom
Yes,
in?
I'm about to zoom into that. I was just
Okay,
going to give a lay of the land here, but yes. So our first segment begins at Douglas Street here, and you can see the blue, the red, the blue, the green, and the pink. You'll notice, and what we're seeing, a lot of trees in this segment, both north and south of the railroad, which is typical through segment 1. Well, we're going to see a lot of tree impacts through segment 1, these green T's. And as we continue to the east, crossing Hawthorne Street, this is where power lines begin to appear, overhead power lines. So through segment 1, there's a culvert here, but primarily trees on the south end, power line on the north end. So that is the difference between the 2 alignments. And obviously the center is the railroad. So we're on the railroad alignment. One thing to note in this particular segment is Council Creek. Council Creek is on the north end, comes through these culverts, goes parallel to the railroad tracks to the south under Hawthorne Street, and then continues on the west side of Hawthorne Street. So one thing to note in this particular location is that a shift in alignment from the center to the south would require some sort of structure to be directly over Council Creek. This pink area is where Council Creek comes underneath the railroad and parallels the railroad and under the road back to its original location on the west side of Hawthorne Street. So that's a major impact. Just wanted to point that out, that we would be directly on top of where Council Creek parallels the railroad. I'm going to zoom out and go on to the next sheet, and I'll zoom into specific locations as we go. As we continue to the east, we have one culvert, again, power poles on the north, trees on the south. We do have to look at some encroachments that you're starting to see, and we noted those last time, about 190 foot of encroachment. Here, there's some, looks like people are parking vehicles and they might be using this access around the property there. No visible structures, but there is usage there. As we continue to the east, again, trees on the south part of the alignment, power poles to the north, another culvert. Street crossings will be the same regardless of which alignment. We'll have to improve the crossings there. As we get to segment 2, and this is I mentioned the division, Oregon Highway 47. This is where we start to getting setback issues. You see the buildings that are right up against the property line. So still trees to the south. We have encroachments on the south side. We've got buildings on the north end of this segment. So those are the things that we are dealing with. And here we start to see some structures, just or corners of structures that are in the property line, inside the property line. But definitely much more impact on both sides, north and south. Here we've got setback issues with these frontage of the buildings right on the property line. We've also got starting to see some structures on the south side that were within the right of way. So this area to the south where you see trees and you also see some small structures. And then north of it, we have not only power lines, but we've got buildings that are right up against property line. As we head east, similar issues. We start to get into areas that have more residential. Again, power lines on the north, less trees to the south, but we're near property line, but no encroachments. But we do have some on the north side. We have some buildings with some setback issues. As we continue east, crossing 4th Avenue, trees, a lot of trees on the south end, and then power lines on the north. A couple of culverts near the intersection there. So similar issues that we're seeing throughout the corridor.
And Adrian, those aren't just regular old power poles, are they? They're all, I think some of them are high tension, aren't they? They're really high voltage.
Yes, so I believe there's some areas that are high voltage, it's transmission areas. So it's not your standard, that you would see in residential area. So it's a lot higher transmission. As we continue through core segment 2, again, similar issues, proximity to existing buildings, trees, power lines. And then you'll start to note there's more residential, more high density areas as we approach segment 3. And we start seeing additional encroachments. So in addition to power line on the north and some tree, we start seeing additional encroachment through this segment 3, right around 5th Avenue, or is it 15th Avenue? This is an area that's looks like there's connections between the different buildings that are there, different structures. As we continue segment 3, again, trees on the south, power lines on the north. As we approach North 29th Avenue, there's a division between segment 3 and 4. Segment 4, we're starting to see a lot more density, a lot more encroachments, including some structures through this area.
So Adrian, if I could jump in here just a little bit,
Yeah.
because I'm going to have to jump off here in a minute. But
Yes.
so those property owners that have structures and then basically have obstructions in the right of way that is not theirs, is that going to be on their responsibility financially to move those?
Yes, I believe so. I believe that they are within the right of way, so they would have to vacate that right of way because it is they're encroaching. I think we've had I think Julie had looked at whether or not they would be allowed to remain there, and the railroad has the easement there, and they would have to be relocated, right? They'd have to move out of the right of way.
Yeah, there is a statute. There, if somebody wanted to call them on it, they would have to move what they have encroaching in the right of way because it is a railroad. So railroads have that authority. County has that authority, and I believe the state has the authority. The right of way is owned by the state, but because it is an easement of the railroad, then there's definitely that authority at this stage. So it depends who owns it, or it may depend who owns it, but I believe all the entities that are likely to own it would have that authority to require them to move it. It doesn't mean that it's easy to do. Some of these people have had stuff in the right of way for decades.
Adrian,
So
I thought west of 19th, I thought we had some manufactured homes that were actually in the easement. None of those were. I thought that was just in segment 3.
They had some sheds and fences and a road that they used to get between the two sections of the manufactured home park.
Yeah, it's mainly access road and some minor structures that were there.
None of the actual manufactured homes though are in the easement.
No.
I don't
Okay.
think so.
So as far as notification, are we planning at some point in time reasonably soon to put everybody on notice that we're looking at trail alignment, we're looking at possibly there have to remove those structures? I mean, so what's our communication going to be to put everybody on notice?
Well, we haven't got there yet, and I'm not sure that we necessarily would do that if we build the trail down the middle, and I'm not sure that we would do that. I don't know. I would have to get instruction to do that.
And I think we're going to have to dig in pretty deep on that because and make sure that we're in the right spot, because I think some of those on the north side on the east side of 29th, yeah, those homes were built. And there may be some question of where the property and the easement actually is.
Yeah, I mean, on not just east of 29th, that there's one minor structure that's in the right of way, and there is this home. If you can see, it's set back probably 5 feet from right of way line.
If I could just ask a super basic question, one of the first projects that are really go into the weeds, like parcel by parcel like this. How does this happen? Just like gradually over time? I don't, obviously there's no nefarious intent or anything, but I'm just, it's fascinating, you know, that there's patches like that.
That's why I brought it up, Juan Carlos. I think we may have a surveying error or something, because those homes were surveyed in and built. That's Loringer. Those were, you know, that's a reputable builder in the area that put all those homes in. I mean, that's literally my neighborhood. I'm just around the corner. I'm just out of frame on this east of 29th area. So I think we're gonna have to dig in and make sure we're in the, I hate to put it this way, that we're in the right when we ask this question, because all of that was surveyed in and it's all part of the record, right? So make sure that we're 100% sure on where the line lies before we start stirring this pot.
And just so you know that the survey that was done was using a lot of the using the survey records that are out there for the easement is. So, but I agree that we want to double check, confirm that.
So I guess one last question, and then I am going to jump off this meeting. But if we would choose the rail line itself, which in this particular slide would be green, we would, if I'm understanding this correctly, we would incur significantly less issues along this line, at least initially in the building of the trail, and then 10 or 15 or 20 years from now, whenever it would be that we would want to put other kind of multimodal in there, then we'd have to deal with those. Am I correct there?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's possible if that's what we chose to do. I mean, it's a choice we could make.
So, but we're not making that decision today, right? We're not saying we're going to choose A, B, or C. Okay.
No.
All right. Well, thank you very much for everybody. I'm sorry I have to jump off, but I appreciate everybody's attention to this. We've got this is obviously a great project, but obviously has some complications to it as well. It's no different than, quite frankly, the Salmonberry Trail. We've got encroachments all up and down the Salmonberry that we're going to have to deal with this as well. So anyway, thanks everybody. And I'm going to leave you now and turn it over to Mayor Delenn. Thanks, Jeff, for taking care of this.
No problem, Jerry. Keep working on that tan. I expect it to be at least 3 more shades darker by the time you get back.
I got 10 days, buddy. I'm good, I think.
All right, man. Thanks. Looks like we got a question from Kyle.
Yeah, so piggybacking off of what Jerry just said, it seems like most of the structures that are in the right of way are coming from the south. And so if we did focus the trail on the center or center north, and we were to build it, you were mentioning the authority of the railroad is probably greater than the authority of the state. So would we put ourselves in a situation down the road where we wouldn't be able to ask those folks to remove those structures in the south if it wasn't the railroad's right away anymore?
I don't think we know who will own the right of way. I know that the county has the authority if the county owned the right of way. TriMet has the authority if TriMet owned the right of way. I believe the state has the authority, although I'm not positive about that. So most of the entities that are likely to own the right of way would have that authority.
All right.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions, I'll continue through, get us through these segments. We're now in segment 4, east of 29th. We showed those encroachments, but we also have some wetlands that we are dealing with. About 330 feet of wetlands north and south of the existing corridor. So this, this is an area that we have environmental impacts, and we have to do some mitigation for any impacts of the wetland. May require type of structure like a boardwalk to minimize impacts to the wetlands.
And that's where the first trestle is, right? Or what are we considering that?
This is Job's ditch, and this is there's existing culvert that goes underneath the railroad. So there's wetland on both sides. Those So the trestle is further over to the east. So right now that the only structure here is a culvert. So segment 5 starts at 341st. This is where we start approaching the trestle that was mentioned earlier. This segment, we've got the same power lines on the north, trees to the south. You start less densely populated. There is some encroachments to the south as we approach 334th. There's a structure, I think it's a mobile structure. I think it might be a mobile home that obviously can be moved, but it is currently placed within the right of way. There is a road, a dirt road, where there's access to this area. So there's obviously somebody that's utilizing this as an access road through this property. There is another structure here with slightly into the right of way. And I think this is also something that's temporary or at least a minor structure that's in the right of way.
And that other one is what, a corner of a garage, I think, that sticks into the.
Yeah, I from being out there, I think it's some sort of like a temporary structure, maybe mobile home that is encroaching into the property.
But that one just to the right of it there?
Yes, that one I believe is a.
I think he's talking about the one under the E250.
This one
the
here?
Square, yeah. There's
Yeah.
a corner of that building.
This corner is in there as well. And I can't remember if this is a shed, like a metal roof shed.
Okay. And then we've got the driveway that goes underneath it right next to it, right?
Correct. So Dairy Creek, so this segment 5 as we approach trestle, we have a short bridge that there's an existing structure now along the railroad line. So if we were shifting north or south, we'd have provide a new structure. There's also the area just to north and south of there. This is maybe potentially wetland or sensitive area. We approach Dairy Creek. And a lot of trees, you'll note a lot of trees to the south. And then Dairy Creek, we approach Dairy Creek, there's a 383-foot trestle that's existing here in the center of the right of way. That, as was mentioned previously, would require upgrades to be able to utilize it. The structure was, it's many years old, many decades old. So obviously there going to need to be improvements in order to utilize the existing structure. This is where we just, when we're looking at something like this, where you're going to spend a lot of money to upgrade an existing trestle, that its useful life may be limited because of what's already there. And even though if we do upgrades to it, there's still going to be some limits to what can be done. This is an area where you'll have to decide, does it make sense to shift this north or south, put in a new structure? One, obviously a longer lifespan, but also if we're going to be, taking the expense of building it on top of the existing trestle, would it make more sense to shift it north or south? Also providing for high capacity transit in the future, not to have to reconstruct a structure. Those are the things that must be considered. If we maintain the existing alignment, at some point that will have to be removed if there is high capacity transit in the future.
And the north sides are those diamonds are the power poles and the trees are on the south?
Correct. And then the other thing we'll look at too as part of the design, depending on the alignment selected, is if we go north or south, we'll do some grading, and that's what that pink box. I thought it was wetland, but no, that's grading. As the railroad had to increase to get up and over the creek, there was some severe grading that happened through here. So north or south there's quite a bit of grade difference between the railroad line and the existing grades. So there would be similar type of grading that would have to happen to get up and over to put a structure over the creek. So there's a minimum clearance that we'll have to have over the creek with our structure. So through this area where we have the 18-foot bridge, we'd have to slowly start to grade up and over Dairy Creek. So segment 5 is dealing with structures, potential structures, new or refurbishing existing structures. And then we start approaching Hillsborough. Again, trees and power lines to the south, some grading that would happen. On the north side, there's more grading that needs to happen based on the grade differential that's there now. Start approaching commercial buildings.
With those grading issues, Adrian, is it possible that we would get into needing right-of-way easements adjacent to the right-of-way or something like that if we did push it north or south?
Correct. So depending on the grading that needs to happen, there may be structures such as retaining walls that may be needed to avoid going into properties and needing easements. But because of the grading situation, there may be additional structures that are needed.
Okay.
And then continuing on from segment 5 that ends at Main Street. Segment 6, the final approach. We have a gravel access road that's being used for access for this commercial property. So there's a gravel access road here that is in the right of way. And then we've also have some minor encroachments as well on the south side. And as we continue to the end of the project, again, gravel access road connecting here that's in the right of way on the north side of the corridor. And that is our corridor. Any questions?
Adrian, did you mention it was attached to the packet and I printed it out. I don't have the title, but it's the segment by segment kind of
Yes.
analysis of the complex.
That's correct. I'll share that next. If there are no questions, so
Mayor Rippey, or not Mayor Rippey, Tim, sorry.
Thank you, Adrian. A couple questions. How much of an impediment really are the utility poles? Are they so obstructive that trails couldn't go around them?
there's opportunity to go around power poles. Through that, we'd have to obviously realign around them. That's not an impediment to go around power poles with the trail. It would just require that obviously we move towards the center line. In areas where we have serious grading, that might require retaining walls and other structures through there.
Right. So Julie, are we looking at having separate trails, one for pedestrian and a separate trail for motorized devices?
I can't say that, but I think given the amount of funding we have, we're probably not looking at that for this project. That doesn't mean that couldn't be possible down the line if we wanted to seek further funding.
Okay. So that sort of precludes my last question. Was you had mentioned earlier about crisscrossing, and I was just curious as to what that might look like. I know it's a little bit premature for that, but if I'm just trying to get it into my head, what it is we're trying to fit into this space, and when you mention moving it up and down or north, south, or center, then there would be some crisscrossing going on, and I don't know what that would look like. How would you actually achieve that. So, okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, about how many feet is each line? So is the green line about what, 20 feet or
But you mean width
width?
for each
Sorry,
of the, yeah, we're assuming at about a 20-foot width. It's a 60-foot corridor, so we're about 20-foot width. So this graphic kind of gives you a visual of all of the different impacts by segment. And so what Julie was mentioning, which I'll share now, is we have summarized it in table format to give you a better sense of by segment, north, center, and south, what the major conflicts are, throughout. So we've got culverts, we've got wetlands, and you can visually see in this table the difference between the three different segments, three different alignments by segment. So this kind of summarizes the graphic into a table. As part of our process, we will be looking at something that was asked earlier, what really is the impact of power pole, and how do we correlate that to having to build structures or retaining walls from a cost standpoint. So the next step, as we continue to develop this, is to really put sort of an impact, not necessarily a cost of a dollar value, but more of a sense of what is one impact compared to the other and how do they relate. Which one is more costly? It might be more difficult than others. Extending the culvert is something that may not be as difficult as having a 300, or as costly as having a 300-foot retaining wall by going to one side or the other. So as we summarize this, we're going to start looking at being able to provide you information to be able to make the decision between the different conflicts and what's more impactful from a dollar standpoint, from a cost standpoint, from an environmental standpoint. So we'll find a way to be able to show that to make it easier for you to understand. So this table just summarizes segment by segment. It gives you the limits of it, and like I mentioned, all the different impacts and comparison between the three alignments.
And basically on the center one, it's almost uniformly just pull the rails, pull the ties.
Correct. For the most part, that's the corridor. The main question will be when we get to crossing Dairy Creek and other places where we would need structures or upgrades to existing trestles.
Yeah, like Forest Grove just paved over the railroad recently. Or ODOT. I'm not sure if it was ODOT or Forest Grove. But 47's now buried the rails.
Forest Grove, I believe, did that, and that was with permission of the railroad.
I was just surprised when I drove over that the other day. I went, wow. Well, I think we're closed officially.
Yeah,
Right.
I spent 4 months getting a permit to walk on it, and I saw the emails back and forth that they're like, "Oh yeah, just pave over it." Okay.
So that is my presentation. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer. And if not, I'd like to open it up for discussion. We want to make sure we had some time to dive into some of the questions that were asked earlier and get some feedback and some of your thoughts.
Team, questions, comments?
I guess I have a comment, not a question. I kind of mentioned it earlier, but I guess my preference is to very long term use as much of this right away for the public good as possible. So I'd like to see us not just use the center line. I'd like us to probably look the center line and the north line with the south, not really a part of this project, but thinking way in the future, maybe that would be something high capacity transit. So.
Well, and we say high capacity transit, but what does that mean? I mean, if you'd asked Mayor Truex and I 20 years ago, we thought that was going to be an extension of the MAX from the government center. And maybe that's not even it anymore. Maybe it's a busway, or who knows?
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what that will be, but I do think long term it should be for the public good, for transportation of some kind. But that also gives those places that have structures, decades potentially to address that. So.
Others? Yeah, Juan Carlos.
Thanks, Mayor. Well, have really enjoyed the presentation today, and I gotta say, Adrian, I really admire and respect your attention to detail, into the entire team that has put together the map. And, from a metro perspective, we support a trail alignment that is cost effective and delivers the best trail experience for folks into the future. And the basis of those comments is just the really based on not just the outreach, but the amount of funding that's dedicated to the fact that we're developing a trail. To that end, I know we've had a lot of conversation about long into the future and high capacity transit, and you definitely want considerations for that transit to be included. But my staff feels pretty strongly, and I understand from their vantage point that it shouldn't necessarily preempt the design decisions for the trail. And also with this also this decision making period that we're in, also understanding potential changes in future ownership. We also feel that whatever public entity that does acquire the corridor, whether that's TriMet, whether that's the county, that there's a written binding commitment that the corridor will accommodate, regardless of what uses in the future do come on here, a regional trail in perpetuity, which I think is also foundational to the money that we pieced together. And I think that's something that we just acknowledge. But in terms of the alignments, for me, I see a horizon to 2029 already, which is 7 years out, and don't want to delay necessarily, and prioritize what's cost effective and really gets to something first. But I also like what Councillor Allen mentioned in terms of trying to do as much as we can now, and we are. And when I say we, I mean the county and the implementation partners, which is all of us. But in this place where we do need to think a little bit about how and if we communicate to those owners that are infringing or encroaching, whatever that right word is, on that easement, about preparation, for the long term, that maybe communicating that at some point that a decision is made, that hey, we did this work, we did this study, we determined this, and it is in this plan that in 30-40 years it might be looked at again, but you're hereby notified. And I'm also conscious of the fact that especially in the last few years with low interest rates, a lot of changing of homes, and people buying homes and maybe not even knowing that they bought a home that is encroaching, right? And so I can imagine being in my home for 2 years, and I get this letter, all of a sudden you're like, wow, this is so unjust, like who do you blame at that point, right? And so I'm also kind of coming down to that micro level and wanting to be empathetic for the homeowners that granted these structures have been here and their lines on a map, but really encourage a process on that back end for communication that is thoughtful, forward looking, and if in some kind of way we can build in a mechanism to do some touch points over the future, especially if we do make a decision in this body that has some kind of potentially binding aspect for the future, which I think is important to us. And I don't think we have a way of determining what kind of transit or future use would be there. And I'm rambling at this point, but I hope my point comes across, and appreciate the opportunity to be heard.
Thanks, Juan Carlos. JC, what you got?
Just a quick question. Do we know next steps? Because someone had made mention that the rail line has been abandoned, and I know that's not the case. Do we know the next steps for the rail line to go through its formal decommissioning or abandonment or what have you. Do we know those next steps and what that timeline is?
We've been waiting. I don't know that I can say. We know that they have issued an intent to abandon and gone through those initial steps. What I did hear, I believe maybe actually Councilor Rippey can say more. He spoke with someone who said that they're doing more evaluation, that they thought that the rail line might be more valuable than they thought it was. And so they're having a third party value it. When I talked with Kerry Goodman at ODOT Rail, he thinks someone probably put a higher value on it than it's worth. It's not been maintained over many years. It's very dilapidated, except where new improvements have been required by new development. It's in pretty bad shape. But we've just been waiting because the railroad has to go forward with the abandonment process.
Julie, isn't it also gotten a little tied up because rail ownership changed or consolidation or something happened? So
Yes.
new owners are like, yes.
Yes. I think that happened. And then the valuation question came up. And so they were going through a third party valuation to determine what it's worth.
Thank you for that, Julie. I appreciate it a ton.
Other questions, comments? Yes, Tim.
Yeah, I'll confirm what Julie said. That's the latest I've heard. I've been working with a staff member on the U.S. House Transportation Committee, and they've been in contact with Genesee and Wyoming, who are the owners of Portland and Western, and she has not gotten any response out of them, any new information that I'm aware of. On the other hand, I'd also, I guess I'm going to just express I guess I'm disappointed with the the kind of kicking the transit issue down the road. I think with the bilateral infrastructure law that's been passed, which is a 5-year time frame, a once in a lifetime opportunity. There's lots of funds for lots of different things, including bridges, including innovative approaches to transit, including smart technology. And there's just all sorts of energy and momentum around improving infrastructure. And to say that we're going to kick the can 15, 20 years down the road, we're missing an opportunity here. Cornelius and Forest Grove are in a transit desert. We have one line. And the congestion is only going to get worse on TV Highway. We could possibly look at, we talk about high capacity, but I don't think we need to even approach it that way. We could look at something that's more scalable, that's clean energy, that's smart, that can connect our communities. So to say that we want to just take the easy route and look at the cheapest solution is disappointing to me, quite frankly. We've been talking transit for years, and now we're going to settle on just a trail is it's disappointing. It really is. And I think that there are opportunities that we will miss if we say that we're going to look at it in 15 years from now, because we're not going to get the opportunities with funding that we're going to get again that we're getting now. It's probably not going to happen. And I just got back from a National League of Cities conference in Kansas City, and I spoke to a lot of people who would be very much interested in this project. It's just a matter of having the political will to move forward and the vision to move forward. So that's all I'm going to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Tim. Kyle?
Yeah, so and if my comments came off as that I don't think we're ready for that high capacity option, I apologize. It just, I haven't heard, I guess we should plan for that. And if the opportunity, the funding is there, like you're saying, then yeah, let's move forward with it. But I just I'm not there in that part of the conversation yet. So I may be unaware of you know, I guess the opportunity for the infrastructure dollars for this project that you're talking about.
Anyone else? Julie, we're getting down to the end.
Yeah, we do
I-
need to open it up for public comment if we have anybody. Erin, do you know if we have anybody attending who would like to comment?
We may, it's mostly staff, so if someone is attending who would like to make comment, please raise your hand. Not seeing anyone.
I don't think so. I do have some next steps, and one comment I would make on that last discussion. We've mentioned these. I think that these other projects are going on, the TV Highway Hope Grant and the Metro High Capacity Transit Study. They're looking at this corridor and considering options. Also, I understand that the TV Highway Hope Grant has contracted with someone to do stops modeling to determine whether this would be a feasible high capacity transit corridor for, I believe, a small starts project. But we're not going to have information on that for a few months. We're going to have to be making some decisions pretty soon for how to proceed with the preliminary design. So I have some, let me pull up my next steps.
Well, you go into next steps, Julie. I'd say my take on it is we have to be mindful of the opportunity to get the trail built without looking at the preclusion of what could we do next, right? It's not this or that, it should be this and that. And then how do we do the right thing with the money we can have and do have to get the trail done? Because right now we don't have a safe way to get out of Forest Grove and Cornelius into Hillsborough unless you want to play a game of Frogger of trying to get run over riding on an undivided shoulder highway at 55, 60, 70 mile an hour cars on TV highway. So this is been once in a lifetime almost now to get to even having this grade separated path to get from city to city through that area. So I think we gotta take that opportunity, but not at the preclusion of the future opportunities or other opportunities. Okay, Julie, turn it back over to you for next steps.
Yeah, and I will just say quickly that the TAC had similar comments. Some people on the TAC said just build it down the trail, get the trail built, and some people said let's not make it harder for transit in the future. So we heard both of these arguments from the TAC as well. Just a reminder that we're planning to do an online open house and survey. We'll be reaching out to staff at your cities and jurisdictions to share that information. I think we'll be having our next steering committee meeting on January 23rd. It's looking like most people are able to attend. February is going to be more challenging, so it's really important to either provide alternates. We would like to have alternates. We want everybody represented at these meetings, and then we'll be having future meetings dealing with more design elements and corridor delivery and implementation. But immediate decisions are to get in alignment so we can proceed with a preliminary design. That's all I have.
Julie, did we have a December meeting also in there?
No, we decided that was just
Okay.
not going to work. It's
Too many conflicts.
yeah.
Okay. Well, we're at the
And
end of our.
Yeah, sorry. The problem with January and February, we've been meeting on the third Mondays, and the third Mondays in January and February are holidays. And so trying to find an alternate time and vacations and other things, it's going to be challenging, but we'll figure something out.
Any last words for the good of the order? Seeing none. It's okay if we leave like 2 minutes early.
Thanks everybody for coming. Thanksgiving week. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
See you at the
Thank
next
you.
one, guys.